Hi, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. We are really excited to get started with the webinar today, your essential guide to launching a HR AI project. Just while we're letting a few people join, we'll be going through some housekeeping. So as per usual, we'll be sending out the slides and the recording after today's session. So keep an eye out for that in your inbox. I just would like to draw everyone's attention to the chat function. Please use it throughout. We do keep an eye on questions. If something piques your interest, you want to make a comment or share a reaction or ask something, please do it in the chat. If you just check in your chat as well that the drop down is selected to everybody rather than hosts and panelists, then that means everyone can see your questions. I think that's just about it. If you use the Q&A rather than the chat, then not everyone can see. So try, if you can, to keep to the chat function. Okay, wow, 2 minutes past. I think we will get started. But before we do get stuck into the meat of today's webinars, we'll do a couple of introductions. So I am Rachel. I am the CMO here at Applaud. I've been with Applaud for about 4 years. Joined right at the start of 2020, which is a really interesting time to join a HR technology company. Certainly has changed a lot. The industry's changed a lot in the past couple of years. And now, everyone's talking about AI. So I'm really excited to be here talking with you about that today. Duncan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining us today. We're super excited about this session. There is just so much talk on this topic. We hope we can cut through some of the complexity and give you some tangible takeaways for today. I'm Duncan, I'm the CTO and co-founder at Applaud. I look after our product strategy roadmap and have been immersed, for good or bad, in next gen AI for the last 12 months or so. So I have plenty to say on it. I will try not to dominate the conversation as much as possible.
Thank you, Duncan. And Ivan, over to you.
Hi everyone, my name's Ivan. I'm also one of the co-founders of Applaud. I'm also the CEO. I've been here since 2008, along with Duncan. Seen a lot of changes in our time. Migrating to cloud happened at the beginning of our tenure at Applaud, and this is another big step change with AI. So delighted to have this session and looking forward to keeping Duncan in check with all his tech speak. So looking forward to the session. Thanks, Rachel.
It's a job for both of us, I think, keeping Duncan in check with his tech speak. Okay, fab. So, Ivan, do you want to just give a brief introduction for any newbies that we have on the webinar, just about Applaud and about what our product suite looks like today?
Sure. I thought it was important to give some context to this session, explain what we do at Applaud, hopefully give you some confidence that we know what we're talking about. So in terms of what we deliver, we have a suite of HR service delivery solutions. They provide better experiences for your employees and managers when they're looking for HR information or have questions about policies or data or anything related to HR. So in terms of the main things in our suite, we have an HR portal that gives you easy access to key employee and manager data and HR services. We have an AI assistant that's news based on generative AI, obviously a topic of today. That's conversational chat based that gives you answers to questions on knowledge and policies. We have knowledge management that helps you govern all that knowledge, keep it compliant, up to date, fresh, remind you when things need to check in and up to date. HR case management is an integrated ticketing system, also supports employee relations type cases, so things like disciplinary, grievances, incidents and accidents at work and so on. Journeys is around moments that matter, around the employee life cycle, key events, things like onboarding, offboarding, some of those really sophisticated processes that often need a lot of touch points within your organization. And then finally, create a platform, which is our no-code platform for extending those solutions for larger enterprises that have more complicated requirements. So over the last 12 months, we've been investing a lot in generative AI and embedding AI across all of those parts of our suite, not just the AI assistant, which is the obvious one, and a lot of people are talking about chatbots and digital assistants, but across the entire suite. And we're just seeing this become such a big trend within HR technology, not just within service delivery, but recruitment, performance, learning, all those pillars as well. It's a real game changer for HR technology. We've also seen over the last 6 months a big appetite for HR leaders and managers and people just wanting to get into AI and how to inject this into their suite. But it's come up against a lot of friction, a lot of uncertainty. There's risks being thrown around all over the place, and there's a lot of caution around, oh, can we go ahead with this? And there's blocks from IT, from information security. And this was really why we wanted to have this session today. Duncan and I have been working with a lot of existing customers and new customers interested in working with us in the future, and we've been wanted to pass across some of the knowledge that we've gained over the last year and convey some of the things that we for HR leaders need to understand, give you a better vocabulary so that when you're in conversations with information security people or IT, you can convey and talk eloquently about the risks and how you in HR are going to help support those risks and manage AI responsibly going forward. Because there's tremendous opportunities within your business to use this new technology for all sorts of positive reasons. Anyway, that's a bit about us, Rachel. I think we've got a poll to kick it off before we get going.
Yes, we do. But I think it's just worth mentioning you've touched on a lot of topics there in your introduction, a lot of AI topics, and we'll cover as much as we can, obviously, today. But it's worth mentioning this webinar is part of a series where we deep dive into lots of these different topics all around AI in HR. So do also, again, use the chat function if there's something that you'd like to see in a future webinar, and we will try our best to incorporate that. Okay, so into the first poll of today, which hopefully you should see coming up on your screens now. What are your plans for Gen AI in HR? So we'll leave this up for about 30 seconds. Please do start voting. And we'll share the results in about 20 seconds now. See some good answers coming through already. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you should all see the poll results now on your screen, but the overwhelming winner for that one is, what are your plans for Gen AI in HR? It's a priority for this year with nearly 40% of you voting for that one. So Duncan, was that what you were expecting to see?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the split is a lot of people doing something this year, about a quarter planning to do something next year, and then about another quarter with no plans to do anything at all, which is really surprising. It's great to see that no one is being blocked by IT, and no one is surprisingly deploying AI in a live project owned by IT. Maybe there's projects going on we're not aware of. There are 15% deploying a live project now. I think the takeaway for this is, in the most part, if people aren't doing something already or now this year, so that's 65, about 55% of people doing something now this year, then they're planning to do something next year. So within the next 12, 18 months, 75% of the audience here will be doing something on this. So, and that perhaps isn't altogether too surprising. I'm really interested in the 23% with no plans at the moment, but I guess that's part of the reason we're attending sessions like today, to learn about what opportunities are and how that may shape roadmaps going forward. So yeah, really interesting to see. Ivan, I don't know if you have any remarks on the results of that.
It's good to see. I agree that it's nice to see that no one's been blocked by IT. It doesn't quite align with some of the customers we've been talking to, but that's nice to see. And this kind of reflects what we're seeing is becoming an essential initiative for lots of teams. Obviously, within larger organisations, the budget year plays a part. So this has come up so fast, generative AI. It really has accelerated over the past 12 months. And it may well have missed budgets for 2024, which is why I'm not surprised to see a lot of people are going for something next year. But encouraging to see, the majority of people are doing something or planning to, and that I guess we have got a little bit of a biased audience. It's encouraging to see that appetite to do something in this field.
Yeah, definitely seems to be in the works for most people, which is great to see. Okay, Duncan, do you want to talk to us a little bit about what's new and what the differences are between traditional AI and generative AI?
Sure. Thanks, Rachel. Well, this slide probably looks familiar, a familiar illustration to many people, albeit with some changes. Interesting to see the evolutionary backward step from augmented reality in that third person to the second from end. Appears to have fallen off a cliff as a trend. I think for me, though, this sort of portrays an image of gradual evolution, and that things have slowly got better over a long period of time. And I think in a way, if we were to put timelines against this diagram, it's perhaps a little bit misleading in that it really has been a huge accelerant in the last 12 months. I think if we think about some of the AI that we've been using of yesteryears, and perhaps Rachel, the next slide might illustrate this better. If you think about some of the AI we've been using in previous years, it has been almost defunct in terms of the quality of what we get. I wonder how many of you have been actually hands-on with real AI features in your various HR tools and have thought, I have no idea why it showed me that. That doesn't make any sense. Or this is useless. It really isn't understanding anything I'm trying to do. And frankly, that has been the story of yesterday's AI, is that in the large part, there is some sort of useful stuff lurking around, but broadly speaking, it's been largely stupid, a bit dumb and unsuccessful. And I think I'm certainly seeing, as I speak to HR leaders, a mix of opinion about this, and there's still, to some, see AI or the current buzz around AI in its new form a bit of a trend, maybe like blockchain or big data, perhaps words that we heard 5 years ago, or poised to be the next big thing. And really, they're trends certainly in the HR tech space that haven't done very much of recent. The new AI is not like that, and I think this example here is talking about an AI assistant, a chatbot, which we all very familiar with as a use case. The one on the left is probably very typical of things you've used when you're booking your airline tickets or interacting with service centers, or even your own HR tools. It's just, it can do a very limited set of things. The one on the right is very much like a chat GPT type response, where it can answer a broad range of questions, and it's an absolutely enormous step change. It goes from being something that's a little bit helpful, borderline useless, to something that is outstandingly good, with lots of change and disruption to think about, that goes with it. So it's a step change, and I think we really have to understand that the old AI of yesteryear and the new AI today is almost like a completely new thing. This is not a blockchain trend. This is something that is going to have huge disruption everywhere. So we look at the next slide. This one that has a lot of words on it, and sort of tries to talk about some of the ways that traditional AI and generative AI have changed. I sort of think about it in a more simplistic way, which I hope will make sense to the audience, is when we talk about AI, AIs are built on what we call models, and models is sort of a set of repeated instructions, essentially, that we throw at a model to train it how to do something. Models have been around in maths for ages, and the traditional AI models, we built models that are designed to do very specific use cases. It could be recommending a song. It could be recommending whether an employee is likely to leave or not. But usually many models have been built for very specific use cases, and there's thousands of them out there. And organizations themselves have never really had the resources to build their own models. I mean, people do that, but it would be a bit like building your own core HR system. For most people, it makes sense to buy something off the shelf. There's a small margin of people where it does make sense to build something himself. But for most of us, we've been using AI models that have been built by software vendors and integrated into their own products, and they've been doing very specific tasks. The new models, the ones on the right, built on large language models, are very different. Whilst traditional ones do very specific use cases, the generative ones are large language models and are general. And so I see this as the left-hand column is specific and the right-hand column is general. And the new large language models have so many capabilities. They can do a large number of different use cases and have general intelligence. Indeed, the goal of OpenAI is to create general artificial intelligence, not generative AI. So these new large language models are just capable of so many different things that opens up a world of new use cases that we haven't even conceived yet. And so for me, it's really a huge shift in moving from specific to general. Okay.
I wanted to chip in actually. I think for me, learning about this, as everyone is the key thing for HR leaders as well is understanding that piece around the training piece. In traditional AI, as I understand it, it may be simplistic, but it's the traditional AI is human trained. It's almost like big flow charts. If someone asks about leave, well, we'll ask them about what do you leave, maternity, and you kind of follow a big sort of chain down. We might be able to recognize a sort of a question that's coming through voice or something, but behind the scenes, there's just logic. And with generative AI, like you said, Duncan, it's training itself using data sets. So we all know that, for example, ChatGPT or OpenAI has got access to the entire internet. It's got access to all those social media conversations. And every time someone asks a question or says, oh, I actually didn't answer that right, it's learning itself. That's what's kind of scaring some people. But what can't it answer? It can't answer anything on data it doesn't have access to. So, for example, if I go and ask ChatGPT, what did Duncan Casemore earn last year? It's not going to know because it hasn't got the data from my organization. And we don't want it to, do we? Because as soon as you let that data out of our organizations, where's that going to go? Who's going to be able to get access to it? Are other people from other organizations going to be able to ask questions about my data because that AI engine has learned from the stuff I've sent it? And I think that's kind of getting into some of the conversation later in this session around that's the worry for businesses. That's really at the nub of the worry. And this is why people are being a little bit cautious about getting into Gen AI because of that training. What happens to the data that I have to send to AI? Is it safe? Will other people benefit from it? Am I giving away secrets and that sort of thing? And I think that's a topic that IT are really taken very seriously, and that's where HR need to get educated around why it is safe and what the sort of questions they need to ask to make sure it's all okay.
Yeah, I think there's actually a question just come in on the chat that's kind of speaking to that point a little bit. So maybe we can just pause for a second and Duncan, I don't know if you can see the chat, a question just coming from Gemma. I don't know if you've got some comments on that. One concern I think we would have on relying on a model owned and maintained by a third party, the quality of your output is very dependent on the model and the potential for degradation, for example, model drift. How would you recommend dealing and testing for this? Appreciate I'm putting you on the spot slightly, but it's quite relevant to the conversation that we are having right now. So I think I want to have a stab at that one.
It really is. It's a brilliant question. I think one of the things we need to remember is that the new set of models that we're talking about are called, built on large language models, they're called GPTs. And the P in that stands for pre-trained. That means they've already been trained on their data set. So from a technical perspective, they're not actually learning from the inputs that you put into it. I mean, they are collecting that data and may use those inputs to train a future version of a model they create, but the GPTs are pre-trained. And today, there are a number of people doing it, but there's really only 3 software vendors in the world that are built models that people are using. There's OpenAI, which is unquestionably the most famous one of all of them. ChatGPT is built on OpenAI. Microsoft Azure is also built on OpenAI. And then there's Google's Gemini, which has recently been rebranded. And then there's now Amazon Claude. And all or three of them have the sort of most powerful set of GPT models, and we're very much dependent on those three vendors to create models that don't have bias in them. And almost every software vendor is using one of those three vendors to produce their own generative AI capabilities. And it's a bit of a black box. OpenAI don't tell us what they train their models on, nor do Google or Claude. These aren't open source. The name OpenAI gives the impression it would be open source. That was the original intention, but it was removed from open source a while ago when the sort of commercial opportunity was spotted. So we're very much at the mercy of what these models can do, and how they've been trained is a bit of a secret. However, there's a number of things we can do and should do when we're deploying AI to try and safeguard as much as we possibly can the way that we're using them. One of the things we'll be doing in this session is talking about some of those safeguards that you could implement and giving you examples about how you can do that safely. But one of the things you can do is of course test it against a series of questions to make sure that it's responding in the right way to bias, and to have a good set of policies and procedures when it gets it wrong, because it will get it wrong. And often it'll get it wrong because of out-of-date knowledge content that we feed it, but it may get it wrong for other reasons too. And sometimes there could be quite dangerous consequences of getting it wrong. And so we need to be prepared for that. We shouldn't shoot for 100% success rate with this. Humans don't get it 100% right by any stretch. And that isn't the goal, but the goal is to be able to drive efficiencies safely at scale, and have the right processes and procedures in place to handle things when things don't go to plan. And hopefully today we'll be able to talk a little bit about how we can help with that.
Thanks, Duncan. I'm going to move you along now so that we make sure we can get through all of this content today. This is, a really interesting slide. I'm going to hand this over to Ivan to speak to a little bit about how HR are in quite a unique position, being able to benefit from AI potentially more than other departments, maybe being able to spearhead that. So Ivan, over to you.
This is just a prelude for the sort of meat of today's session around getting projects started. But what we have seen from conversations with clients, particularly ones that are actually now starting projects, is often they are the first department within the organisation to get going with AI in a widespread way. There's loads and loads of use cases across any business to use AI. For example, we're in software development. There's AI opportunities for development or for testing and so on, but that's a technology focus. But almost every business across the planet can use AI within their HR function for answering questions on policies or helping with recruitment. And what we're seeing is that when a lot of the HR leaders we talk to have gone to IT, they're actually the first. They're actually the first that are pressing the IT teams and say, look, we need this. This is really important. This is going to give massive benefits. It's going to give us massive return on investment. And we're finding that a lot of policies are kind of in those early stages within the organisation. So this is the message now. And again, a reason for having this session is to say HR are right in the epicenter of getting going in the enterprise. They've got a fantastic use case. They've got fantastic return on investment that can be obtained with AI, and realize that you might well be the first testing those policies that are in their infancy.
Thank you. Right.
I can talk this quickly. I think there might be a poll coming up after this last one before we get going. But this is just a quick slide we put together to sort of structure what we're going to be talking about today. And I mean, this is a very, very typical way you would kick off any or get approval for any large HR technology project within your organization. If you're implementing a new core HR cloud system or payroll or something like that, something that requires big budget from your CFO, you'd usually go through this sort of process. And we wanted to kind of layer on going in for an AI project across this. And there's 2 bullet points on here that are particularly important, looking at strategy, policy and risks. Obviously, when we get into research and capabilities, you're looking at systems out there, the vendors that are out there, that's important. We can go through the ones that are out there. There's some names that you will know of, some you won't, but some of the new stuff, and this is where HR needs to get that vocabulary together, understand the capabilities of AIs and the risk, is we want to really focus on those middle dots around strategy, policy. There's obviously going to be conversations with information security, with IT leaders as well, to get these projects off the ground. And that's where a lot of projects at the moment kind of running into friction right now. So that kind of structures the conversation for the rest of the session, Rachel. I think we may have a poll next.
I think you're right. Yes, we do. Second poll, so you should see that coming up on your screens shortly. What's the first Gen AI project you think you'll prioritize? So if you can just select from the multiple choice options on your screen. Again, we're going to give this about 30 seconds before we take a look at some of these results. So what's the first AI project you think you'll prioritize? Something prioritize has been cut off on the screen there, but what's the first project you think you'll prioritize? A couple of seconds left for this one before we close it off.
What's your vote on this one, Ivan?
Well, it's absolutely the top one.
Mm-hmm.
No bias at all. Well, we've got 3 people on the call that have already started, so we'll have a definitive answer from a few people there.
Oh, it looks like you predicted this, Ivan, with digital assistant chatbot coming in strong first with 50% of you. That's quite an easy one to well, actually not easy, but it's quite an obvious one to get started with. Obviously, Ivan, that's what you were expecting to see from these results.
Yes, and it's the obvious use case, isn't it? It's got a great return on investment around all those queries that are coming into your HR service delivery team that can be automated, more efficiencies around getting answers to staff quicker. Everyone's using ChatGPT. You can visualize it straight away. It's an easy pitch. We want ChatGPT for the workplace, so employees can use it rather than ringing up our help desk and think of the savings that will come off the back of that. We'll talk about how to manage some of those savings later on, but it is the most common case by a long way. I think probably recruitment is the second one. I think that came on the poll. I can't remember.
Yeah, 14% for recruitment.
Those are opportunities around recruiting, but of course that's good for organisations that are recruiting heavily. Not everyone is at the moment, so each to their own. I think the next slide sort of talks about some research. I think this was from Gartner. Yes,
This is Gartner. Yeah, this is Gartner research.
On the right, and it aligns completely to. I know we've got a small data set, but 13 people, but completely aligns to what we've just seen. People are looking at that service delivery and operations at the beginning, looking at things like creating documents, policies through AI, and then tailoring it through your HR business partners. The employee-facing chatbot is super popular right now. People have been trying for that for years, and even at Applaud, we built one like about 4 or 5 years ago. We couldn't get it working because of the reasons Duncan said about earlier. But now everyone has seen what this stuff can do, and they're eager to get that in. So those top 3, very clear front run project starting.
Yeah. Okay, Duncan, do you want to talk us through the use case examples for HR service delivery?
Sure. I think fitting into that top one, there are so many opportunities to use AI as an AI assistant. That's the use case that most people are familiar with. But actually, when you dig deeper, there are hundreds of different use cases that can apply across HR ops teams. That's where we specialize. There's also hundreds of use cases in recruitment and learning and other domains which are sort of outside of our focus. But certainly in HR ops, there are hundreds of many use cases where it can apply. So we must think about AI as being something that can solve many problems more than just the AI assistant can. Some of the benefits that we can get from this clearly freeing HR from repetitive tasks to focus on strategic value add things is a huge opportunity, creating that very compelling tier 0 so that employees can get answers to everyday questions more easily. They don't have to email HR or raise a ticket or tap the right people on the shoulder and go through multiple gates to get there. Instant 24/7 answers will unlock the productivity and efficiency of HR teams. It also helps employees get a faster experience. Employees, according to some research that Forrester did a couple of years ago, spend 2 to 4 hours a week trying to navigate HR and find HR information. So there's a huge time saving there in terms of employees' own productivity, but also there's the experience side of it as well. We were working with a customer who has a lot of content and knowledge, which is very well constructed, but applies to multiple countries, and just trying to personalize that content so the right employees see the right content for their country and are not getting answers to things outside of their domain is actually quite a difficult problem to crack. So that personalization element as well can help, meaning they're getting the right answers and not just fast answers. And I think with service delivery as well, there's plenty of opportunities for HR to be in charge of their own destiny. They certainly need to partner with other lines of business, but I think HR do need specialist HR tools designed for the HR domain that help HR and employees get the most value out of it. And I think this is where HR have an opportunity to take control of their destiny and be in charge of their own tools they choose to use for service delivery that are fit for their specific requirements.
Nice, thank you. Okay, Ivan, do you want to talk through this leave behind that we're giving for people today?
Yeah, so if you've got your phones there, one of the most important things and one of the takeaways we wanted from this session is just getting a list of things you should be thinking about as an HR leader, and that you will be asked about if you take this as a proposition to your IT teams, who often will be the put technology governance in place. We went through a load of questions and realized we had slides and slides and slides of bullet points that would take far too long to go through. So if you scan your that QR code, you should go straight to a 2-page PDF. I think it should download straight away. There's a takeaway. There's a nice set of questions on there for you to think about. I was going to pick a few out, Duncan. Well, careful of time. We've only got 27 minutes left. But things like risks, for example, that training piece is super important. Coming back to that, one of the things that we always kind of get asked is, will we have an AI solution? We go to a customer, almost always the team that is checking this out will say, how is your AI solution trained? So not for us, but just generally, what does that mean? What should an HR leader be looking for, or what sort of answers should they be getting from their vendor around that training question?
It's a super important question. It's really actually quite hard to answer. I think there's probably two definitions of what training means. There's the purist sort of technical definition, which is naturally the one that I lean on, and then there's sort of a more practical understanding of what training means. In terms of the sort of technical meaning of training, that usually means that the data that you're feeding into it will be used to train the model in the future, so that the model gets smarter and smarter over time. That actually doesn't happen with the GPT and the large language models like ChatGPT, for example. The models you might have heard of, like 3.5 and 4 and 4.5, actually don't get smarter over time. But what they do is they use all of the information they get to build new models, so 5, 6, 7, which use the previous inputs, and then they pre-train those models using those inputs to create new models that are pre-trained with all of that other stuff, and are very selective about what they use to try and avoid putting in bias, etc. So the pure definition of training means that the models are using data to train future versions of the model. What you really don't want any AI model, certainly any GPT model, using your private company data, whether it's personal information data or policies, being used to train future versions of the model. And if you're using ChatGPT to put stuff in, you should be aware that the ChatGPT is likely to use that data you put in there to train future versions of the model. It's not safe to put sensitive information in there. However, most of the software vendors that you purchase from should be declaring that they will not be using any of your data to train future versions of the model. It's certainly the case with us, is that all of the information that's used is not used to train future versions. That's the technical meaning of it, but the practical meaning of it is is actually different to most people. So, for example, using all of your internal knowledge to answer questions, we very much do that. And some people like to think of that as training because it kind of makes sense that it's training based on your knowledge content. It's not actually training on it technically, but it's kind of using your knowledge content to help provide better answers.
Well, we've
And
actually we've had a question quite close to that come in the chat, so it seems a good time to pause and ask that one. How can we validate the content generated? And I think by content generated in this context, it means kind of the answers generated by the AI assistant. How can we validate that they're going to be aligned with HR policies? So I guess this is kind of alluding to, you know, that point about how we're training the AI assistant. So I want to have a stab at taking that one.
yeah, okay. It's also tricky, but with the right guardrails, it's actually fairly straightforward to do. I think first of all, we don't want the AI assistant that you use to be performing a full array of services. If you've got an AI assistant for HR, it should be focused on the HR domain. And so you don't really want it answering questions about politics or your competitors or things completely outside of that domain. So narrowing the scope of what it is allowed to do is one of the guardrails that you can implement. That's certainly one thing. That's certainly one way to do that. The other way is to keep the knowledge content up to date. So poor quality content going in will mean poor quality answers coming out, unfortunately. Whilst as clever as these models are, they may still regurgitate an out-of-date fact if that fact is sitting there in a knowledge article somewhere that's 2 years out of date. So trying to keep your content up to date is important, and that's why the process needs to consider more than just the AI assistant as well itself, and the governance and the policy that goes into feeding the information into it is also important.
Yeah, and I think we've definitely had conversations with customers and potential customers where they've actually been quite comforted by the fact that they can choose which HR policies they want to use to train their assistant versus, you know, which ones they don't. And that's as important as well, I think.
I think before I go into the next slide, sorry, the last question, really interesting one. I think it might have come up in the chat, but I think there's one word that's wrong there, and it's if, because AI will give a wrong answer at some point, not because of necessarily the technologies. To what Duncan has said, often it can be down to content being stale or wrong. I can give an example. Big Brother, I'll give an example on a project we're working on where we were asking things like, what's the payroll cutoff date? Very, very common question. And who wants to ring up HR asking what the payroll cutoff date is? You know, just getting that question. And it gave the wrong answers. It gave the wrong answers. And the reason it gave the wrong answers is because this year's payroll cutoff dates weren't uploaded into the system.
Right.
So there's an example of where it's perfectly capable of doing it, but we forgot to upload the payroll dates. So we do. I'm going to do a pitch here because we have got a webinar coming up in June around what you need to take care of when you're actually doing a project. And I think a lot of the questions on here are around the testing methodology. How on earth you test something like AI is difficult, but kind of understanding the pitfalls you can run into and actually just understand the limitations. There's also a very important piece around change management and disclaimers as well. And you'll see if you use AI tools all over the place, you'll start to see disclaimers pop up saying this is an answer given by AI. It might be wrong. Bear that in mind. So really interesting question, gets asked a lot. I saw someone come up with the chat, but some of that can be mitigated with good practice.
I'm going to move you along now to make sure we get through everything. Another really good takeaway that we're offering up today, the AI policy checklist. Duncan, do you want to speak to this one a little bit?
Sure. Get your phones out, snap the code, and sort of send yourself a copy of the document. This is a really useful document for HR leaders and those partnering with other lines of business to start spinning up an AI task force and think about how do we create policy around this to ensure that we do things in a safe way. And this PDF document here goes into a little bit of detail about the steps that we recommend you follow in order to get that governance process spun up correctly. So it talks about how you assemble a task force, how you go about creating an inventory of your current data, And there's sort of 8 or 9 different steps there to go through in terms of getting an AI policy together so that you can then adopt technologies and deliver value to your employee customers faster.
Yeah, HR should be getting an AI HR policy together, and that'll be a necessary step. I think if anyone needs that, we can help out as well as a vendor. We've been through that a few times, and there's also questions around have been coming in around informing employees how we mitigate employee worries, and there's a nice piece in the checklist about that, recommending things like town halls or roadshows, whatever you call them, where you have those educational sessions to your team. It's a big change management piece, like we're introducing AI into the workplace. This is what it's going to mean for you, and also sort of saying about the limitations and expectations. But I think just understanding what people might think when this stuff is pulled in, and of course within the HR teams as well, where there might be potential job losses or worries about job losses if you're introducing automation. All those things need to be thought of beforehand, and there's a nice bit of content for anyone that wants to structure a to-do list of things to pull together in order to get a project going.
Yeah, I think there was just too much to get into the webinar today, but we are obviously available to answer any questions on this later if you download the policy checklist and then want to come back to us to talk it through in a bit more detail. Okay, Duncan, over to you.
Okay. Well, there's not too many words on this slide, so I'll give you the chance to read them. AI is not a solution. It's a toolkit that can help solve problems. And there's lots of different tools that are built using AI for different jobs. The notion that one tool can do it all just doesn't make sense in any context, and it's true equally for AI. So I suppose you can think of AI more like a toolbox, and then within that toolbox you have a set of tools, and each one of those tools can do its function very well. But if you try and use that tool for something else, it can lead to poor results or even potentially be damaging. So, for example, even in the sphere of AI assistance, something like Microsoft Copilot is designed for doing things in Windows, like switching on dark mode, light mode, changing settings and control panel. Microsoft Copilot for Office is designed to help you sort of create PowerPoints and Word documents and Excels and things like that. Microsoft Copilot for Teams is designed to summarize meetings and provide action points and things like that. And each of those variants of Microsoft Copilot's tool is designed for a specific purpose. And in the same way that that's a suite of tools for IT, HR also need their own suite of AI tools to solve HR problems. So an AI tool to solve recruitment problems isn't going to be the same type of AI tool that we offer for HR service delivery, for example. And so I think we just need to be mindful that if you're dependent on other projects or tooling you might have across your organization to solve your problems, it probably won't. And it's important to be able to go into detail about what each of these can and can't do and what it does well and what it doesn't do well. Sadly, I'm sure you'll all be deeply disappointed to learn we're not doing a product demo today. We're happy to do one offline, but you'll see in our product that we use AI in lots of different ways across the product, and each of those serves its own purpose and has a very specific function.
We had an interesting question yesterday. Can I turn AI on and off? And whereas I think some product offerings, AI is a bolt-on, it's very much not the case in at Applaud. And I think there's an education piece around AI not being a bolt-on or not being an additional bit that you can just chuck on the end. It's very much interwoven into the kind of the core DNA of the product. So I think that's just a bit of a mindset shift. Okay.
Some examples of some of the use cases in just even in the HR domain. We are focused on the ones that we've got our logo against, funnily enough, but knowledge management, HR service delivery, and HR ops. There's a whole number of different use cases within each of those. So something like knowledge management, obviously, a lot of people are using AI to generate knowledge. We're using it for that, of course, but also to be able to create scorecards of existing knowledge and sort of measure how readable it is, what the tone of voice is like, where there may be overlap and coverage issues, stuff that might be out of date. We're using it to track revision history, so we can see what's changed from one revision to another. So there's lots of different ways it could be used in each of these. And we put on there some examples of some of the use cases that you might be looking to solve across different tool sets, and some of the vendors who are excelling in each of those areas that we're aware of. Love to hear your views on what you've seen and what you like in the space. But this is our sort of view of the world, if you like, with regards to some of the HR use cases. So naturally, a good starting point we come into this is to think about things that are most important for you to solve, so that you can define a roadmap around this and what delivers the most value fastest.
Great. ROI, everyone's favorite topic. Ivan, do you want to dive into this a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this is capping it off. At some point, you're going to have to go to your CFO or whoever approves budgets and say, this is why we want to spend this many dollars on this initiative. And I found over the years that in HR, we sometimes find it quite difficult to build up these cases. A lot of software purchases are very qualitative and don't have the hard savings sometimes that CFOs in particular look like. What's the value of a survey tool or a performance management tool? It's all about making sure you've got the best talent in your workforce, making sure people are trained and their skills develop and so on. And sometimes that's very difficult. Even though we know it's important, all HR people, we know how important this is, the people are the most important resource in your business. It's still hard sometimes to put a dollar value on some of these tools. But this one seems to be very, very straightforward, quite honestly. One of the easiest ROI cases I can remember working on in since we've been at Applaud, to be honest. Probably taking me back to the days where self-service came along in the mid-2000s for the first time, and all that HR administration was then passed nicely onto managers and employees to do instead of HR administrators, and that ROI case was strong. The ROI case for this is also strong, particularly in the service delivery area, where it's easy to come up with some numbers. How many tickets are you getting coming in? I know we're focusing on the HR service delivery case because that's what we know, but you could do the same on recruitment or any other part of the business where you have a lot of time spent. But how many service requests you come in? How long does it take to process one on average? What's the salaries of your HR service delivery people? Put those costs together. Think about the cost of the tool that it's going to cost you every month or every year. And you start to build up a pretty simple case, and the stats on early discovery. And remember, this is very, very new technology. It feels like ChatGPT's been here for ages, but it's actually still less than a year and a half old. So there's not that many case studies coming through, but they'll be coming through very, very fast, I think. And early ones are showing a very, very attractive return on investment, or almost instant in some cases. So you can see some of the stats with the cursor moving on the right. The top one is a particularly interesting one on LinkedIn, where there's over 50% ROI, which is your CFO will rub their hands at that sort of ROI. If you can get above 20%, you're doing well. And some of the other stats that we're seeing around time saved, and you can translate time saved into dollars saved, of course. There'll always be worries within your HR team. Of course, if you're kind of going after all those service desk agents and thinking, how can I cut those costs? But, that's the way of the world at the moment. What I would observe, though, is I remember living through this about 20 years ago with that self-service case I talked about, and no HR team I know ever went backwards in terms of headcount after self-service came in. Although that was the ROI, what happened was HR evolved as an organization into providing much more value-add things. That's when performance management became a thing, and where recruitment practices and online learning really took hold. Talent management boom of the 2010s really came around when some of that administration was taken away from the HR administrators. So let's see what happens. But there is a very, very clear case to save dollars, which is a nice luxury you don't often see in HR. And if you are looking to raise funds to do, shouldn't find this one too hard. And if you do want support, always give us a call. This is something that we've done many times with customers and can help out build a case if you need that.
Okay. As I mentioned at the top of the webinar, this is part of a series. So we have some other great webinars coming up over the summer. So please do use the QR code on your screen now if you'd like to sign up for some of those. And I'm just going to take this opportunity to have a quick scan through the chat and see if there's some questions that we potentially missed as we were going through that we might want to answer. So probably quite pertinent to the slide that we just had up. I'll flick back in a second, is this one. Ivan, I'm going to pass this one to you. It's from Michelle. How can we ensure the successful adoption and integration of AI within our existing HR processes?
Okay. So I think one of the things is actually, in fact, if you skip onto the webinar slide, actually, Rachel, I'll do it before the one on the 26th of June. I think a lot of it is around how you attack the deployment. And there's some themes and tips that we're going to go through that based on some early projects that we're doing with customers. There's a lot of change management to do. You've got to be educating. You can't just roll these tools out with no communication to your employees and managers. So there's change management to do. There's those roadshows, but there's also particular governance around testing. And it's, like I said before, it's going to be a devil to test. This one is you've got to put this out as almost beta within the organization and iterate round as AI gets better and better within your organization. That's a real key theme of deploying AI successfully. Understand that it's not going to be perfect first time, but that you have the tools, or that you're given the tools by your vendor of choice to go and see what's working, not working, change things, tweak things, change the prompts if you know what prompt engineering is for those educated on the call. Go around again, make sure your knowledge is up to date. Oh, I've missed some knowledge out, or I haven't defined that acronym, or I haven't uploaded my payroll cut-off dates. That's why AI is getting it wrong, that sort of stuff. Those are the things that will improve the delivery of the AI tech. But we'll talk about those a lot more in that particular webinar in June, and take some lessons learned of early projects that we've done.
There's another question about implementation, but I think I'd say the same thing. I think that will get covered in that future webinar. Duncan, I'm going to try and wrap two questions into one. I've been touched on this a little bit, but we have employees and HR employees specifically who are worried about AI and worried about their jobs. You mentioned some of the guardrails earlier, and Ivan mentioned that often actually freeing up HR resource just kind of enables HR to evolve as a department rather than losing people. But do you have any other thoughts or comments you'd like to kind of add to that might alleviate some of those concerns?
Yeah, it's really tricky, isn't it? Well, I think we need to start with education and understanding what AI is, what it isn't. When we look at job cycles historically of disruptive technologies over the decades, usually it doesn't actually result in masses of job losses, but usually job change. And I think here we're going to see quite likely some jobs changing more than others, and maybe many changing as much as 50% of the job duties and responsibilities changing as a result of AI. So I think to many people it is a bit scary and does certainly could be a threat to some, but I think we need to encourage an open mindset of learning about what the potentials are, and seeing how we can leverage it as a tool that can help us do things better, rather than something that we sort of hide into a box and forget about. So I think we're going to encourage sort of a way of trying to embrace an education and openness towards what it can and can't do, and do that in a safe way. But certainly a sensitive topic, and we need to be very mindful of the emotions that come with some of the disruption that's going to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think we've covered off most of the questions that have come in through the chat, but if something kind of comes to mind after the fact, then you know where we are. We've talked a lot about AI, and we've alluded to the AI that we have in the Applaud product. We are just starting to offer a free 30-day trial, and we haven't publicised this broadly, but obviously we've got a group on this webinar of keen kind of AI HR professionals looking to get ahead of the curve. So we did want to open it up to people on this call. Just do scan the QR code if you would like to sign up for that, and some Applaud team members will be in touch with you and get you set up. we'd encourage you to put our own AI assistant through the test, through the ringer. If you've got any kind of non-confidential or just any kind of policy documents you want to upload or anything, it could be a washing machine manual, upload your documents to our AI assistant and really grill it, ask it lots of questions and let us know how you get on. But as we mentioned earlier, there's AI throughout the Applaud platform in lots of places. So do sign up for the trial and we'll get you set up, and then we can talk you through all the places that AI appears in the Applaud product. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of our session today. Contact information is on the screen there in case you have any specific questions or you want to reach out to any of us to dig in a little bit deeper to any of the topics we've covered today. I don't know if Ivan or Duncan, if there's any last comments from you, but if not, we'll leave it there and wrap up for the day.
Thanks to everyone for attending and spending almost an hour with us. I hope we gave you some insight into getting started with AI. So enjoyed the session. Thanks, Rachel, for hosting, and hopefully some of the audience will come back for more in some of our other webinar sessions later in the year.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks.